The alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed in every corner. Yuna grabbed the edge of her seat as the vessel shook violently. Metal groaned and twisted around her. The other crew members shouted into their communication devices, but their words were lost in the noise. "Engine failure! Main and backup systems offline!" someone yelled. Yuna's fingers trembled as she strapped herself tighter into her chair. Through the window, she saw the planet below growing larger and larger. Green and purple colors mixed together in thick patterns. It was a jungle planet. They were going to crash into it. The captain's voice came through the speakers. "Emergency landing protocol! Brace for impact." Yuna closed her eyes. She thought about her brother Day. He had died on a mission like this 3 years ago. She had joined the space program because of him, because he had loved the stars so much. Now she understood his last moments, the fear, the helplessness. The ship hit the planet's atmosphere. Fire erupted around the hull. The vessel spun and twisted. Yuna felt her stomach turn. She heard something break in the back of the ship. Then another explosion. The smell of smoke filled her nose. They crashed through trees. Massive trunks snapped like twigs. The ship tore through branches and vines. Each impact threw Yuna against her restraints. Her head hit something hard. Pain shot through her skull. Everything went dark for a moment. When she opened her eyes, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The ship had stopped moving. Yuna's ears rang. She tasted blood in her mouth. Slowly, she unbuckled her restraints and stood up. Her legs shook beneath her. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded strange in the silence. "Is anyone there?" No response. Yuna moved through the tilted corridor. Sparks flew from broken panels. Water dripped from somewhere above. She found the main cabin first. The captain was still in his chair. He wasn't moving. She checked his pulse. Nothing. Her throat tightened. She found 2 more crew members in the engine room. They were gone too. Yuna's hands shook as she closed their eyes. 4 other crew members were missing. The ship had broken into pieces during the crash. They could be anywhere in the jungle. Yuna made her way to the emergency supply room. The door was jammed. She kicked it 3 times before it opened. Inside, she found a survival kit, some medical supplies, a damaged translator device, and the emergency beacon. She tried to activate the beacon. The screen flickered and died. It was broken. No, she whispered, pressing buttons frantically. Nothing worked. She gathered what she could carry. Water purification tablets, emergency food rations, a small medical kit, a flare gun with 3 flares, a knife, a thermal blanket. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The escape pod section had separated from the main ship. Yuna found it wedged between 2 enormous trees. The pod was dented but stable. She decided to make it her shelter. At least it had walls and a door that could close. Outside, the jungle was like nothing she had ever seen. The trees were massive, with trunks wider than her ship had been. Their bark was dark purple and rough. The leaves above glowed with a soft blue light. Vines hung everywhere, thick as her arm. Strange flowers bloomed in bright colors that hurt to look at. The air was hot and wet. It stuck to her skin. Yuna could smell earth and plants and something else. Something wild. Sounds came from every direction. Clicks and chirps and rustles. She couldn't see what made them. She climbed into the escape pod and sealed the door. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Yuna sat down and took a deep breath. Then another. She needed to think clearly. Panic would kill her faster than any alien predator. First, she treated her wounds. A cut above her eye. Bruises on her ribs. Nothing broken. She was lucky. So lucky. Next, she took inventory of everything she had. 3 days of food if she ate carefully. Water purification tablets for 2 weeks. The medical kit was basic but complete. The knife was sharp. The flare gun might scare away animals. Yuna tried her communication device. Static. The crash had damaged the ship's long-range transmitter. Even if she sent a signal, it wouldn't reach the nearest space station. They were too far into unexplored space. She opened her personal datapad. It still worked. Yuna started a log entry. Day 1. The ship crashed on an uncharted jungle planet. Captain and 2 others confirmed dead. 4 crew members missing. I'm alone in the escape pod. Emergency beacon is broken. No way to call for help. I don't know if rescue will come. Her voice cracked. She stopped recording. Night fell quickly on the planet. The blue glow from the leaves grew brighter. New sounds filled the darkness. deep howls that made her chest vibrate, screeches from high in the trees, something large moving through the undergrowth nearby. Una sat with her back against the pod wall. She held the knife in one hand. Sleep seemed impossible. Every sound made her jump. Her mind kept showing her images of the dead crew members, of her brother's last transmission before his ship was lost. Hours passed. The howling grew louder, closer. Whatever made that sound was big, very big. Una heard trees cracking, heavy footsteps that shook the ground. The creature passed near her pod. She held her breath. Sweat dripped down her face, the footsteps moved away. Slowly, the jungle grew quieter. Una's eyes grew heavy. She tried to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled at her. She drifted into an uneasy sleep. She dreamed of Day. They were children again, playing in their grandmother's garden. He was laughing and chasing butterflies. "Look, Una," he called. "They're flying to the stars." When she woke, pale light filtered through the pod's small window. Morning had come. Una was alive. She had survived her first night. She ate a small portion of her emergency rations. The food was tasteless, but it gave her energy. She drank water and checked her wounds. Everything looked okay. Una knew she couldn't stay in the pod forever. She needed to find water, maybe locate the other crew members, see if any part of the ship had working communication equipment. But the jungle was dangerous. She had heard that last night. She opened the pod door slowly. The jungle greeted her with its strange beauty and hidden threats. Somewhere out there, her crew members might be waiting for rescue, or they might be dead like the others. Una stepped out into the alien world. The hot air wrapped around her. Insects buzzed past her head. In the distance, something roared. She was a scientist, not a soldier. She studied animal behavior in laboratories, not jungles. But she was human, and humans had survived worse than this. They had climbed out of caves and crossed oceans and reached the stars. She could survive this too. She had to. Una picked a direction and started walking. Behind her, the escape pod sat silent among the giant trees. Ahead of her, the jungle waited with all its mysteries and dangers. Her path was lost, but she was still alive. And where there was life, there was hope. 3 days had passed since the crash. Una had explored the area around her pod, searching for any sign of her crew. She found pieces of the ship scattered through the jungle. Broken metal, burned plastic, parts she couldn't identify. But no people. No survivors. Her water was running low. The purification tablets could only do so much. She needed to find a stream or river, something clean and flowing. That morning, she had packed her supplies and set out in a new direction. The jungle grew thicker as she walked. Vines crossed her path like ropes. She had to cut through them with her knife. Strange plants grew everywhere. Some had leaves as big as her body. Others had flowers that opened and closed like mouths. She avoided touching anything she didn't understand. The heat was getting worse. Sweat soaked through her clothes. Una stopped to rest against a tree. That's when she noticed the marks on the bark. Deep gouges like something with claws had scratched the wood. The marks were fresh. She could see where the tree was still bleeding sap. Una touched the scratches. They were longer than her hand. Whatever made them was big and strong. She looked around nervously. The jungle suddenly felt more dangerous. She kept walking, but now she moved more carefully. She checked every shadow, listened to every sound. The scratches appeared on more trees, always at the same height, always with the same pattern. Something was marking its territory. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the jungle. High and desperate, like crying. Una stopped. The sound came again. It was weak and broken, but definitely there. She followed it, pushing through thick bushes. The crying grew louder. She found herself at the edge of a small clearing. A massive tree had fallen, its roots torn from the ground. The root system formed a cave-like space beneath it, and from that space came the crying sounds. Una approached slowly. "Hello?" she called softly. The crying stopped, then started again, more urgent this time. She knelt down and looked into the dark space under the roots. At first she couldn't see anything. Then her eyes adjusted. There were shapes moving in the darkness. Small shapes. Una pulled out her flashlight. The beam revealed 4 creatures huddled together. They were about the size of large dogs. They had 6 legs each and fur that seemed to change color in the light. Their eyes were large and crystalline, reflecting the flashlight like mirrors. Cubs. They were cubs. They shrank away from the light, pressing against each other, One of them made a small chirping sound. They were terrified. Yuna looked around the clearing. Near the fallen tree, she found another body. An adult version of the cubs. It was massive, easily the size of a small car. Its fur was matted with dried blood. Deep wounds covered its side. It had been dead for at least a day. "Oh no," Yuna whispered. "Your mother." She looked back at the cubs. They were trapped. Heavy branches had fallen across the entrance to their den. The adult must have been trying to protect them when it was killed. The cubs were too small to move the branches themselves. Yuna sat back on her heels. This was not her problem. She had her own survival to worry about. She needed to find water and shelter, maybe locate her crew. These were alien creatures. They could be dangerous. They might carry diseases, but the cubs cried out again. The sound was so sad, so desperate. They were babies, lost and scared. Just like she was, Yuna thought about her brother, about his last mission. He had sent one final message before his ship was destroyed. In it, he had said, "If I don't make it, remember what Mom always told us. We help when we can. That's what makes us human." She set down her pack. "Okay," she said to the cubs. "Let's get you out of there." The branches were heavy. Yuna had to use all her strength to move them. Her muscles burned. Splinters cut her hands. But slowly, inch by inch, she cleared the entrance. The cubs watched her with their strange eyes. They didn't try to run. Maybe they were too weak. Maybe they understood she was helping. When the entrance was clear, Yuna stepped back. "Come on," she said gently. "It's safe now." One cub poked its head out. It sniffed the air. Then it looked at Yuna and made a small growling sound. Not threatening. More like asking a question. "I won't hurt you," Yuna said. She sat down and made herself smaller. Non-threatening. She had studied animal behavior. Many species responded better to someone who didn't tower over them. The first cub crawled out completely. Its fur shifted from dark blue to light green. Yuna realized the color changes must show their emotions. Fear to curiosity. The other three followed. They moved slowly, carefully. One of them limped. Another had a cut on its front leg. They were injured and definitely starving. She could see their ribs through their fur. Yuna opened her pack. She had some emergency rations. High-protein bars meant for humans. She didn't know if the cubs could eat them, but she had to try. She broke off a piece and held it out. "Here, food." The cubs stared at her. Then at the food. The first one took a cautious step forward. It stretched its neck and sniffed the food. Quick as lightning, it snatched the piece from her hand and backed away. The cub ate quickly. The others watched. When it didn't get sick, they moved closer. Yuna fed them all piece by piece. They ate like they hadn't had food in days. They probably hadn't. When the food was gone, the cubs sat down near her. They were still wary, but less afraid. The smallest one made a chirping sound and took a tiny step closer. "What do I call you?" Yuna asked. She looked at each cub. The first one, the brave one, she decided to call Hana. The second, bigger and stronger looking, was Kwan. The third had gentle eyes, Suji. The smallest, the one who had chirped at her, was Tay. She knew she was being foolish, naming them, getting attached. But she had been alone for 3 days. The loneliness had been crushing her, and these cubs needed help. They were just babies who had lost their mother. "Hana, Kwan, Suji, Tai," she said, pointing to each one. "And I'm Yuna," Tay chirped again. His fur turned a warmer color. Almost golden, Yuna stood up slowly. She needed to find water. For herself and now for the cubs. She started walking toward the sound of running water she had heard earlier. After a moment, she looked back. The cubs were following her. They walked in a small group, staying close together. Their eyes darted everywhere, watching for danger. But they followed Yuna. They had chosen to trust her. Yuna felt something warm in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found others who were lost, others who needed help. Maybe that's what being human meant, finding others in the darkness and deciding not to let them face it alone. She led her strange new family deeper into the jungle, toward the sound of water. Behind them, their old den sat empty. Ahead of them, an uncertain future waited. But they would face it together. 1 week had passed since Yuna found the cubs. They had traveled together through the jungle until they found a good place to stay. A stream ran through a small clearing. The water was clean and cold. There were rocks to sit on and trees to provide shade. It wasn't much, but it was home. The first days had been difficult. The cubs didn't trust Yuna. They followed her because they had nowhere else to go, but they kept their distance. When she tried to touch them, they snapped at her. When she got too close, they growled. At night, they slept far from her, huddled together in a pile. Yuna understood. They had lost their mother. They were scared. Trust had to be earned. She studied them carefully. She watched how they moved and communicated. Hana was the leader. When danger was near, her fur turned dark red and the others paid attention. Quan was the protector. He always positioned himself between the others and any threat. Suji was gentle and curious. She was the first to explore new things. Tay was the baby. He stayed close to the others and made soft chirping sounds when he was nervous. Yuna learned that the cubs could sense things she couldn't. They would stop moving before she heard any sound. Their bodies would go still. Then, moments later, she would hear something in the distance. They felt vibrations through the ground with their 6 legs. It was like having an early warning system. Food was a challenge at first. Yuna's rations wouldn't last forever. She needed to find food in the jungle. She watched what the cubs tried to eat. They dug in the ground and found fat white grubs. They ate certain fruits from low-hanging branches. They caught small lizard-like creatures that ran across rocks. Yuna tried the same foods, not the grubs. She couldn't bring herself to eat those, but the fruits were sweet and filling. The lizards could be cooked over a small fire. She taught herself to hunt with a spear she made from a straight branch and her knife. The cubs watched her hunt. At first, they seemed confused. Why was she so slow? Why did she need tools? But then they started helping. Quan would chase prey toward her. Hana would signal when animals were near. They were beginning to work together. Slowly, trust grew between them. Yuna stopped trying to touch the cubs. Instead, she let them come to her. And they did. First Tay, who was always the bravest when it came to Yuna. He would sit closer each day. Then Suji, who seemed fascinated by Yuna's tools and equipment. Then Hana and Quan. By the 5th day, Tai slept next to Yuna, his warm body pressed against her side. When she woke in the morning, the other cubs had moved closer too. They had accepted her into their pack. Yuna started teaching them simple commands. She used Korean words and hand signals. Stay with a flat palm. Come with a wave. Danger with a sharp whistle. The cubs learned quickly. They were smart, much smarter than any animal she had studied before. On the 7th day, Yuna decided to search for more ship wreckage. Maybe she could find communication equipment, or more supplies. The cubs followed her as they always did now. They walked for hours through the jungle. Yuna marked trees as they went, so they could find their way back. The cubs seemed to understand what she was doing. They added their own marks, scraping the bark with their claws. Then Suji stopped. Her fur turned dark red. Danger. The other cubs froze. Yuna crouched down. What is it? She whispered. Hana pointed her nose toward a thick cluster of trees. Yuna looked. At first she saw nothing. Then she noticed something metallic. Another piece of the ship. They approached carefully. It was an escape pod, similar to the one Yuna had sheltered in after the crash. But this one had landed harder. The door was torn off. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Inside, Yuna found a body. Her colleague, Hyun. He had been a good man, kind and funny. He had shared his extra rations with others. Now he was gone. Yuna's eyes burned with tears. She pulled his body from the pod and found a flat spot beneath a tree. She didn't have tools to bury him properly, but she covered him with stones. It was the best she could do. The cubs watched quietly. Tay made a soft, sad sound. Even they seemed to understand death and loss. Yuna searched through the wreckage. Most of the equipment was destroyed. But then she found it. A communicator. It was damaged but still had power. She turned it on. The screen flickered to life. Her heart jumped. This could work. But when she tried to send a signal, nothing happened. The range was too short. She would need to be higher up. Much higher. Maybe on a mountain or tall hill. She checked the map function. It still worked. The pod had recorded their location before crashing. According to the map, there was a mountain ridge 3 days' walk to the north. If she could reach it, she might be able to send a signal strong enough to reach a rescue ship. Yuna saved the location data. She took the communicator and everything else useful from the pod. Extra medical supplies, a better knife, some energy packs that hadn't expired. Then she said goodbye to Hyun and led the cubs back toward camp. That night, something changed. Yuna noticed new marks on the trees around their camp. Claw marks, like the ones she had seen when she first found the cubs. But these were fresh. Something had been here while they were gone. The cubs noticed too. Their fur turned dark colors. They growled low in their throats. Hana walked the perimeter of the camp, sniffing everything. Yuna built up the fire. Fire scared most animals. She hoped it would scare whatever had been here. She couldn't sleep. The cubs huddled close to her, their bodies tense. They were ready to fight or run. Whatever was necessary. Near midnight, they heard it. A roar that made the ground shake. It was the same sound Yuna had heard on her first night. The sound of the apex predator. The creature that had killed the cubs' mother. It was hunting them. Yuna gripped her knife. The cubs spread out in a defensive circle around her. They were protecting her. These small creatures who had been starving and helpless a week ago were now ready to defend her with their lives. The roaring came again. Closer this time. Trees cracked as something massive moved through the jungle. Yuna saw glowing eyes in the darkness. 2 of them, large and yellow. They stared at her from between the trees. Then the eyes disappeared. The sounds faded. The predator was leaving. For now, but Yuna knew it would come back. They couldn't stay here. They had to move. They had to reach the mountain ridge and send that signal. It was their only chance. She looked at the cubs. Tomorrow we start traveling, she told them. We're going to go on a long walk. It will be dangerous. But we'll be together, Tay chirped softly. Hana pressed her head against Yuna's leg. They understood. Or maybe they just trusted her. Either way, they were ready. Yuna added more wood to the fire. She would stay awake tonight, keeping watch. Keeping her family safe. Because that's what they were now. A family not by blood, but by choice. And in the morning, they would begin their journey to the mountain. Together. They left at dawn. Yuna packed everything she could carry. The cubs had grown bigger in the past 2 weeks. Now they were large enough to help. She tied some supply bags to their backs. They didn't seem to mind. The journey to the mountain ridge would take 3 days, maybe 4. The jungle was thick and dangerous, but Yuna had no choice. Every day that passed meant less chance of rescue. The ship's emergency beacon had failed. This communicator was her only hope. The first day of travel was hard but uneventful. They followed game trails when they could find them. The cubs moved through the jungle better than Yuna. They seemed to know which paths were safe, which areas to avoid. Their instincts guided them. Yuna watched their fur colors carefully. When they turned green or blue, she knew it was safe. When they shifted to red or black, she became alert. The cubs were like living warning signs. By evening, they had covered good distance. Yuna checked the communicator's map. They were on track. They set up camp in a cave entrance, not deep enough to trap them, but sheltered enough to hide their fire. The cubs ate dried meat Yuna had prepared. She ate some of the jungle fruits. They had become her main food source. Her human rations were gone. She was fully dependent on the planet now. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel strangely connected to this place. The second day brought rain. Heavy, warm rain that soaked through everything. The jungle became muddy and slippery. Yuna fell twice. The second time, she twisted her ankle. Pain shot up her leg. Hana noticed immediately. She came to Yuna's side and made a concerned sound. The other cubs gathered around. They seemed worried. "I'm okay," Yuna said, though she wasn't sure that was true. She wrapped her ankle with medical tape and kept moving. They couldn't stop. The predator was still hunting them. She could feel it. That night, the cubs took turns keeping watch. Yuna tried to stay awake with them, but exhaustion pulled her under. When she woke, Tay was curled against her chest. His warm breath tickled her neck. The others slept nearby. Someone had draped leaves over her like a blanket. The cubs were taking care of her now. The third day started well. Yuna's ankle felt better. The rain had stopped. They made good progress through the morning. By afternoon, they could see the mountain ridge in the distance, dark rock rising above the jungle canopy. They would reach it by evening. That's when the predator attacked. It came without warning. One moment, They were walking through a clearing. The next, something huge burst from the trees. The creature was massive, 4 meters tall on 4 powerful legs. Its body was covered in thick scales that looked like armor. Its mouth was full of teeth longer than Yuna's hand. Saliva dripped from its jaws. Where the saliva hit plants, they withered and died. Acid. The cubs reacted instantly. Hana roared a warning. Quan charged forward to meet the predator. Suji and Tai pushed Yuna backward, trying to get her to safety. But Yuna didn't run. She grabbed her spear and stood her ground. The cubs were her family. She wouldn't abandon them. The predator swung its massive head toward Quan. He dodged, but barely. The creature's teeth snapped shut inches from him. Hana attacked from the side, her claws raking across the predator's scales. It barely left a mark. The creature was too strong, too big. They couldn't fight it. "Run!" Yuna shouted. "This way." She turned toward a rocky area. If they could get to higher ground, maybe they had a chance. The cubs followed her command. They broke away from the predator and ran. But the creature was fast. It chased them, its footsteps shaking the ground. Yuna could hear its breathing, hot and angry. It was gaining on them. They reached the rocks. Yuna started climbing. The cubs scrambled up beside her. Their 6 legs gave them good grip. They climbed faster than the predator could follow, almost safe. Almost. Then Suji slipped. She fell backward, right toward the predator's open jaws. Without thinking, Yuna dropped her spear and jumped. She caught Suji in midair. They both crashed to the ground. The impact knocked the wind from Yuna's lungs. The predator loomed over them. It raised one massive claw to strike. Yuna threw herself over Suji, trying to shield the cub with her body. This was it. This was how she died. But the strike never came. Hana and Quan landed on the predator's back. They bit and clawed at its neck. Tay grabbed its tail and pulled with all his strength. The predator roared and spun around, trying to shake them off. Yuna pulled Suji to her feet. The cub was bleeding from a deep gash on her side, where the predator's claw had caught her. Blood soaked into her fur. "Can you move?" Yuna asked urgently. Suji tried to walk. She stumbled. The wound was bad. Very bad. The predator threw Hana off its back. She hit a tree and fell, dazed. Quan and Tai still fought, but they were tiring. They couldn't hold it off much longer. Yuna remembered the flare gun. She still had 1 flare left. She pulled it from her belt and aimed at the predator's face. She fired. The flare shot out with a bright flash. It hit the creature directly in its eyes. The predator screamed, a horrible sound of pain and rage. It shook its head violently. Smoke rose from where the flare had burned its scales. "Now! Run!" Yuna screamed. The cubs jumped down from the predator. They ran to Yuna. Hana was limping but moving. Quan and Tay looked exhausted. Suji was barely standing. They climbed the rocks together. The predator thrashed below, still blinded by the flare. Its roars echoed through the jungle. But it couldn't follow them up the steep rocks, not while it couldn't see. They climbed until they reached a flat ledge. Safe, for now. The predator's roars faded as it retreated into the jungle. Hunting blind was too dangerous. It would heal and come back another day. But today, they had survived. Yuna immediately turned to Suji. The cub was lying on her side, breathing heavily. The wound was deep and still bleeding. Yuna pulled out her medical kit. Her hands shook as she worked. She cleaned the wound with water. Suji whimpered but didn't pull away. The other cubs watched with worried eyes. Their fur had turned pale colors, fear and sadness. Yuna used human antibiotic ointment on the wound. She didn't know if it would work on alien biology, but she had to try. Then she stitched the gash closed. She had never done this before. Her stitches were clumsy and uneven, but they held. Finally, she wrapped Suji in bandages. The cub's breathing was shallow. Her fur had lost its color-changing ability. She looked gray and sick. "Please," Yuna whispered. "Please don't die." She held Suji through the night. The other cubs pressed close, adding their warmth. Yuna sang songs her mother had taught her, lullabies in Korean. She didn't know if Suji could hear her, but she sang anyway. Morning came. Suji opened her eyes. She made a weak, chirping sound. She was alive. Yuna laughed and cried at the same time. Relief flooded through her. Suji nuzzled her hand. The cub understood. Yuna had saved her life. The other cubs surrounded them. Their fur burst into bright, happy colors. Tay chirped repeatedly. Hana licked Yuna's face. Quan bumped his head against her shoulder. They had fought together, saved each other. Now their bond was complete. Yuna looked toward the mountain ridge. They were close now. Just a few more hours of climbing. She would send the signal, and maybe, just maybe, someone would answer. But whatever happened next, she wasn't alone. She had her pack, her family, and they would face the future together. 3 days passed on the mountain ridge. Yuna had activated the communicator and set it to send a distress signal on repeat. Now all she could do was wait. And hope Suji was healing slowly. The human antibiotics had worked. The wound was closing without infection. It seemed human and alien biology weren't so different after all. Suji could walk now, though she still limped. The other cubs stayed close to her, protective and gentle. Yuna spent the time improving their camp and caring for her strange family. She taught the cubs more commands. They learned quiet, hide, and follow. She told them stories about Earth, even though they couldn't understand the words. They seemed to like the sound of her voice. On the third night, Tay suddenly stood up. His fur turned bright yellow. Alert. The others rose too, all facing the same direction. They had sensed something. Yuna grabbed her knife and looked at the sky. At first she saw nothing. Then a light, moving among the stars, growing brighter, coming closer, a ship. Her heart raced. After all this time, after everything, rescue had finally come. The ship landed in the clearing below the ridge. It was bigger than her research vessel had been. Lights illuminated the jungle. A door opened. Figures emerged wearing protective suits. "Hello," Yuna shouted, waving her arms. "I'm here, up here." The rescue team saw her. They climbed up to the ridge quickly using climbing equipment. There were 6 of them. When they reached her, they removed their helmets. The leader was a woman about Yuna's age. "I'm Commander Nari," she said. "We received your distress signal. We're from the Galactic Coalition Rescue Division. Are you injured?" "I'm okay," Yuna said. Relief made her dizzy. "My name is Yuna. My ship crashed 3 weeks ago. I'm the only survivor." Then Commander Nari saw the cubs. Her expression changed. She stepped back and raised her weapon. "Don't move," she said sharply. "Everyone, weapons up. We have unknown predators, and no." Yuna moved between the commander and her cubs. "They're not predators. They're with me. They're my family." The other rescue team members aimed their weapons at the cubs. The cubs growled, their fur turning dark red. They moved into a defensive formation around Yuna. Commander Nari stared at her. "Those are wild animals from an uncharted planet. We have protocols. All unknown species must be quarantined. Potentially dangerous fauna must be contained for study." "They're not dangerous," Yuna insisted. "They saved my life. Multiple times, that doesn't matter. Regulations are clear." The commander spoke into her communication device. "Prepare the containment cages. We have 4 specimens for quarantine." "No." Yuna's voice was hard. "You're not putting them in cages. That's not your decision." Commander Nari's tone was firm. "Step aside. We'll tranquilize them. They won't feel anything." The cubs sensed the threat. Hana roared. Quan moved forward, ready to fight. But Yuna raised her hand. "Stay," she commanded in Korean. "Don't attack." The cubs obeyed immediately. They stopped moving, but their eyes never left the armed humans. They were coiled springs, ready to defend Yuna if needed. One of the rescue team members, a man, lowered his weapon slightly. "Commander, look at that. They're following her orders. That's not normal animal behavior. Trained animals can follow commands," Commander Nari said. "That doesn't make them safe." "They're not just trained," Yuna said desperately. "They're intelligent. They understand. They communicate. They feel emotion and form bonds. They're more than animals." She pulled out her data pad. She had been recording everything. Videos of the cubs learning, solving problems, showing empathy. She showed the commander footage of the cubs helping her hunt. Working together, protecting her from the predator. "Watch this," Yuna said, playing a recording. It showed Suji getting injured. the cubs staying with her, bringing her water, keeping her warm. They understand sacrifice. They care for each other. That's not just instinct. That's intelligence, another team member spoke up. He was tall with kind eyes. Commander, I'm Minho, the team's xenobiologist. I've studied pack behavior in dozens of species. What I'm seeing here is remarkable. These creatures are demonstrating self-awareness, empathy, and cooperative problem-solving. Those are markers of sapient-adjacent intelligence. Commander Nari frowned. That's a serious claim. Look at them, Minho said. They stopped attacking when she commanded them, even though they perceive us as threats. That shows impulse control and trust. Those are sophisticated cognitive abilities. Yuna felt hope rising. They understand more than you think. When I was injured, they protected me. When one of them was hurt, I saved her life. We formed a real bond. Not human and pet. Human and friends. The regulations exist for a reason, Commander Nari said, but her voice was less certain now. Regulations can change, Yuna said. Humans didn't survive because we were the strongest species on Earth. We survived because we made connections. We brought wolves into our caves and they became dogs. We learned to work with other species. That's what makes us human. We choose our families. We choose who to protect. She looked at the cubs. Tay was watching her with his large, crystalline eyes, trusting her completely. When I found them, they were trapped and starving, Yuna continued. I could have left them, saved myself, but I didn't. Because humans help when we can, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't benefit us. That's our strength. Commander Nari was silent for a long moment. She looked at the cubs, at Yuna, at the data on the pad. Finally, she spoke into her communicator. Cancel the containment cages. She looked at Yuna. These creatures will be granted temporary protected status, pending full coalition evaluation. They can remain with you during the journey back. Yuna nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, the commander said. The Coalition Council will decide their final status, but she paused. What you've documented here is significant. If these creatures truly demonstrate sapient-level intelligence, they deserve protection under Coalition law. Minho stepped forward. I'll support your case before the Council. What you've achieved here, the bond you've formed with an unknown species, it's extraordinary. It shows what's possible when we approach first contact with compassion instead of fear. The rescue team lowered their weapons. Slowly, the cubs relaxed. Their fur shifted to calmer colors. They understood the danger had passed. The journey back to the ship was careful. The cubs stayed close to Yuna. When they reached the cargo bay, the team had prepared a space for them. Not cages, just a large, comfortable area with soft material for bedding. Yuna sat with her cubs as the ship lifted off. Through the window, she watched the jungle planet shrink below them. She had crashed there alone and terrified. She was leaving with a family. Tay chirped and rested his head in her lap. Suji pressed against her side, healing wound now just a scar. Hana and Quan lay nearby, their eyes alert but peaceful. Yuna stroked Tai's fur. We made it, she whispered. We all made it. She thought about her brother Day. He had died alone in space, far from home. She had been alone too, lost in the jungle. But she had found others who were lost, and together they had survived. Maybe that's what being human really meant. Not being the strongest or the smartest, but being willing to answer when others cried out in the darkness. Being willing to help even when it was dangerous. Even when it was hard. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. Stars stretched around them. Yuna closed her eyes and smiled. She had lost her path in the jungle. But she had found something more important. She had found purpose, family, hope, and she had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our hearts, our ability to love across all boundaries, our willingness to choose compassion over fear. The cubs cried out and she had answered. And in answering, she had discovered what truly made her human.